The ancient villa nestled deep within a vast pine forest on the outskirts of the city had once brimmed with laughter and light. Now it was nothing more than an empty, frigid shell where time seemed to have frozen. The only sounds piercing the silence were the wind whistling through the towering treetops and the faint stifled sobs drifting from a room on the second floor. That was where the twin boys, Lucas and Liam, curled up under their blankets, their eyes red and swollen from crying. Their father, Alexander Grant, a renowned architect celebrated for his monumental designs, had become a ghost wandering the very home he had crafted. His wife Clara, the woman who had infused every corner with warmth and color, was gone forever, taken by a car accident 2 months prior. The shock had not only stolen the love of his life, but had also drained the soul from the house. Alexander no longer cared for his blueprints, his meetings, or even the sunlight. He lived like a machine, burying himself in work to escape the pain, but the pain clung to him like a shadow. Lucas and Liam, only 4 years old, couldn't comprehend why their mother never came home. They called her name in their dreams, clutching the teddy bears Clara had sewn for them, and cried until they collapsed from exhaustion. The household staff, though devoted, could only offer meals, clean clothes, and hollow words of comfort. Child psychologists were brought in armed with drawing exercises and therapeutic games, but nothing worked. The boys remained huddled in their corner, rejecting all contact as if the outside world were a threat. The villa, with its moss-covered stone walls and towering windows, had once been Alexander's pride. Clara had transformed it into a haven, stringing paper lanterns along the hallways that glowed softly each evening. Now those lanterns gathered dust, and the only light in the house came from the dim nightlight in the children's room. Alexander no longer had the strength to illuminate them. Everything began to change on a stormy afternoon when a young woman stepped into the villa, soaked to the bone, clutching a tattered umbrella and mud-caked boots. Her name was Eleanor Hayes, a recent art school graduate hired as a part-time housekeeper. Eleanor was unremarkable. Her brown hair was messily tied to one side, her gentle green eyes slightly averted, and her shy smile rarely surfaced. She had been hired through an agency to clean and tend to the children when needed. No one expected much from her, not even Alexander, who barely nodded when the butler introduced her. Eleanor started her work quietly. She dusted the paintings Clara had created, reorganized the books in the library, and gently knocked on the nursery door each morning. At first, Lucas and Liam paid her no mind. They glanced at her with distant eyes before turning away, resuming their silent play with building blocks. Eleanor didn't push. She simply sat on the floor at a respectful distance and began to draw. Her pencil glided across the paper, sketching whimsical images: a rabbit with floppy ears, a tiny house with a puffing chimney, or a field of sunflowers in full bloom. One rainy afternoon, as the downpour showed no signs of stopping, Eleanor entered the nursery carrying a small handmade paper lantern. She placed it on the table, lit a tea light inside, and a warm amber glow instantly spread, dancing across the walls. Lucas, the slightly more curious of the twins, looked up. "What's that?" he whispered, his voice hoarse from disuse. Eleanor smiled, the first in weeks. "A lantern. It chases away the dark." She said no more, only nudging the lantern gently toward him. Liam, though still silent, inched closer. The boys touched the thin paper, feeling the warmth from the candle. For the first time in 2 months, they fell asleep that night without crying. From then on, Eleanor became part of their daily rhythm. She never forced them to talk or play. Instead, she brought small, meaningful things: a wildflower picked from the garden, a star-shaped cookie, or a short story about birds building nests in the pines. She told her tales in a low, warm voice, sometimes humming folk songs her own mother had sung. Lucas and Liam began to anticipate her arrival each afternoon. They called her Ellie, a name no one in the house had thought to use. Alexander noticed the change one evening as he passed the nursery. Laughter, soft, hesitant, but unmistakable, drifted from within. He froze, gripping the doorknob, hardly believing his ears. Peering through the crack, he saw Eleanor sitting on the floor, the twins gathered around her. Liam, the quieter of the two, held a new paper lantern Eleanor had just taught him to fold. Lucas giggled as Eleanor made a silly rabbit face. Alexander didn't enter. He stood there for a long time, feeling a warm breeze thaw his frozen heart. For the first time, he sensed a flicker of hope. In the days that followed, the villa gradually came back to life. Eleanor didn't just care for the children. She quietly did things no one noticed. She cleaned the old lanterns in the hallway, replaced their candles, and lit them each evening. The amber glow danced on the stone walls again, as if Clara had never left. She planted more flowers in the garden, wild daisies and lavender, Clara's favorites. She even found a dusty old photo album in the library and left it on the dining table where Alexander couldn't miss it. Alexander began speaking to Eleanor. At first it was just brief questions. What did the kids eat today, or did they sleep well? But gradually he realized she was unlike anyone he'd ever met. Eleanor never spoke too much or pried into his past, but she always listened. When he spoke of Clara, how she danced in the kitchen while cooking or sang the boys to sleep, Eleanor simply nodded, her eyes glowing with genuine empathy. One night when nightmares woke Lucas and Liam, Alexander rushed upstairs. He paused outside the nursery, hearing Eleanor's voice. She was singing the lullaby Clara used to sing. Sleep now, the stars are watching over you. Her voice wasn't perfect, slightly off-key in places, but it carried a tenderness that lulled the boys back to sleep. Alexander stood there, tears streaming silently down his face. He realized that though Clara was gone, her love lived on through the melodies, the lanterns, and the heart of this young woman. Time passed, and Eleanor was no longer just a housekeeper. She became part of the family, not by blood or paperwork, but through shared moments. Lucas and Liam began calling her Mommy Ellie in their carefree moments, and though Eleanor blushed awkwardly, she never corrected them. Alexander, still aching for Clara, started to see Eleanor differently. She didn't try to replace Clara, no one could, but she brought a different kind of light, gentle and resilient, like the paper lanterns in the dark. One winter evening, as snow fell heavily outside, Alexander prepared a special dinner. He cooked himself clumsily, but with heart. Eleanor helped the boys fold new lanterns, and the family, though only 4, lit them together in the garden. The tiny lights floated amidst the snow like stars fallen to earth. Lucas and Liam ran and laughed, their breath forming white clouds in the cold air. Alexander stood beside Eleanor, watching quietly. "Thank you," he said, his voice rough. "You brought them back to me." Eleanor shook her head, smiling. "I only lit a lantern. The real light comes from them and from you." The villa was no longer a tomb of the past. The children's laughter echoed through the halls. The lanterns blazed every night, and the garden bloomed with flowers, even in winter. Alexander began designing again, his new blueprints pulsing with life. He never forgot Clara, her portrait still hung proudly in the living room, but he learned to live on for the boys, for himself, and for Eleanor, who showed him that love never truly leaves. A year later, on Clara's Memorial Day, the family released lanterns over the nearby lake. Dozens of paper lanterns drifted upward, their light reflecting on the still water. Lucas and Liam stood beside Eleanor, each holding a small lantern. "Mommy Clara's watching us, right?" Lucas asked, his voice clear. Eleanor nodded, holding their hands. "She's always here, in the light, in the laughter, and in your hearts." Alexander stood behind them, watching the 3, his new family, bound not by blood, but by love. He smiled for the first time in so long, feeling true peace fill his soul. The house in the pine forest was no longer cold. It was alive, warm, and radiant with light. The pain of loss lingered, but it had made way for hope, love, and new beginnings. The lanterns were lit every night, a reminder that no matter how deep the darkness, a single flame is enough to guide the way.